In this presentation, we will take a look at the Form 941 within QuickBooks Online. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info. We are in our practice payroll test file. You can follow along in your own business file or take a look at QuickBooks free test drive practice file. We're going to go down to the Workers tab on the left side to consider the payroll options. Note that the payroll will typically be run through here. We've got our 3 employees set up within payroll. The process of running payroll is up top. As we run the payroll, QuickBooks will then create the journal entries, create the financial statements, and then create the quarterly forms, that being the Form 941. Before we process the Form 941, let's first consider the reports. So we're going to go to a payroll report by going to Reports on the left side. Scrolling down to our payroll reports, we're going to go to the Payroll Detail Report. We'll select the Payroll Detail Report. We're going to look at it for the first quarter, which will be January through March. Run that report. And this will give us a detail of check-by-check information, and it'll also give us the quarterly information down below. So this is going to give us a summary of that quarterly information. The 941s will then group this information for us. It's going to take that payroll process that was processed on a check-by-check basis. As we can see here, we can see that detail. Each check is being processed for each employee. This is on a monthly basis for those 3 employees. It'll also be able to summarize this data in a summary format such as this report, and be able to summarize this data also in the quarterly reports, the Form 941. This is really what we're kind of paying for, one of the major things we're paying for when you purchase QuickBooks Payroll, because it's useful to be able to group this information, especially when we have some things that are going to be a little bit more complex in terms of the payroll processing. So let's now open up the 941. We will do that by right-clicking the tab up top. I'm going to duplicate this tab so we can have both tabs open at the same time. Pull the one from the left to the right. So now we have the 2 tabs, and I'm going to scroll down to the Taxes tab. So the payroll taxes on the forms, the 941s, will be in the Taxes tab. Then we're going to go to the second tab, which is Payroll Taxes as compared to the Sales Taxes. And then we're looking for the quarterly forms. The 941 is a quarterly form. We'll select the quarterly form, and we're looking for the 941. We are considering the first quarter, so that's January through March. So every three months, every quarter of the year, we have the report. We'll run that report. QuickBooks will then compile this data for us. Again, very nice process that QuickBooks can do this for us and compile this data. We've got the employer identification number up top, the address, and then we're going to have the quarter that we are in. We're processing the first quarter here, January, February, March, it being indicated by the X up top. We're going to go then down to line 1. You'll note that we had 3 employees, but we didn't process the payroll for the third one in the last period. So that's why there's only 2 being shown here in box 1. It'll group that information for us based on the payroll that has been processed. And then we have the line 2, which is going to be the wages for FIT, Federal Income Tax wages. So this is the FIT wages. And then we have the Federal Income Tax. This is the actual tax that's being calculated here. We can't derive it from this number because each employee has different amount of withholdings and exemptions. So this is just an information report. Again, great that QuickBooks can compile this information because we can't verify this number. All we can do is basically say that this is what we took from the employees. In other words, we can't verify it with a simple calculation of a flat rate based on the total wages for FIT because there's multiple employees that have multiple different conditions, and it's a complicated tax in that case. The Social Security wages are going to be down here, and then we have the rate. Now remember, the rate is both the employer and employee portion being calculated here. This is the Social Security tax then, both employer and employee portion. The Medicare wages down here times the Medicare rate, which of course, again, both employer and employee portion, gives us the actual tax, both employer and employee portion. And then we have the added Medicare because we have that one employee in this case going over the amount in where we would need to calculate the added Medicare. And so we have added Medicare. Note that this number, and this number all have to do with wages, and they are all different. And that's because we're talking about wages as compared to as they relate to specific taxes, not as they relate to total compensation. You'll note that all of these numbers are different than the number, if we go back to our report, the number for total compensation here. This is regular pay, OT pay, salary, bonus, the S Corp 4,000. This is the total wages here, 311,708. And that number doesn't match any of these numbers here. It's higher than all of these numbers here. So note that on QuickBooks' own report, this report here, we have wages for the quarter that aren't on any of the wage numbers on the 941. None of the numbers on the 941 for actual wages are equal to each other in this example. And not only that, even if we go back to the highest number, which is on this report, this doesn't even show total compensation, what has actually been earned by the employee, because we may have benefits over and above the gross pay even being reported here, included in this case, a 401k plan that is employer contribution, the employer, not the employee, this is the employer contribution, plus anything that might be a benefit over and above the gross pay. In this case, the medical insurance was a benefit paid over and above the gross pay. So in other words, it's not being included in this number. So just realize that when you talk about compensation with an employee and you say, how much are we earning? You certainly can't take, FIT wages and say, hey, which is this number, the amount that would be reported on the W-2, and say that's what you're earning. And even if you take the Medicare wages, which is on the W-2 as the highest number, that's still not what the total earnings that they're making are, because there's some things that could be decreasing the Medicare wages, and they may be getting compensation such as a 401k plan over and above that, as well as other type of benefits over and above that. So it's important to kind of realize that, one, just for the discussion about your own payroll with employees, and two, just to realize the complexity of this form. Now, if this was a very simple form, if we didn't have anybody making over the cap for Social Security, for example, then the Social Security and Medicare would probably be the same at that point. And that's over 100,000, well over 100,000 to hit that cap. So if we didn't have anybody making over that amount, these two would be the same, and we wouldn't have this added number here. And if we didn't have some benefits, including a 401k plan, it's quite possible that these three numbers would all be the same. So we'll talk about some of the things that will differentiate these numbers as we go through, and we'll actually work through this problem and see these exact differentiations and go into more depth in terms of what the actual differences are, a lot more depth in terms of what those actual differences are. But just note that it's all these laws that we're going to put in place, none of them are complex in and of themselves. But you can see once they get compiled together, we start to see that a complicated picture just because of the so many different factors that are involved. No one factor being difficult. All the factors put together, however, means that we need to basically be able to piece out all those factors and understand why these, for example, three numbers, which are all wages, are different. So QuickBooks, that's what we're paying QuickBooks for. So that's going to be great that they can basically break that out. We want to basically understand it so we can explain it to ourselves and others. And then, of course, we have the total of these here. So this is going to be FIT, Social Security, and Medicare. And then if we go down below, we had to record this in another schedule, the Schedule B, which is going to report by month. So here's the monthly activity for the 3 months. If we add that up, we get the 122,235. This is not the deposits. These are the liabilities per month. And then if we scroll back up, you'll see that that number is going to be this number here. It's off by 2 cents. We had a rounding. So there will be a rounding errors because we're going to pennies. So it's off by 2 cents. So the IRS allows us to put it in that rounding. QuickBooks does it for us, which is nice. And then we have the liability here. Now, normally we haven't processed the payments in this example. Typically, the payments should already have been processed. We already make the payments by the time we process this form. And in that case, then this form should owe nothing. We should already have the payments being made. Hasn't been done in this example, but the payments would typically be made. And this would just be an information form similar to the 1040, where we would just basically, if the 1040 was done perfectly, our individual tax return at the end of the year, we shouldn't owe anything and we shouldn't get a refund. We would have paid it perfectly. The problem is it's too complex. The taxes are, so we don't know exactly what to pay until we actually process the payroll, so we try to overpay and get a refund. Here we know exactly what to pay. We already paid it if we're doing things properly, and this is just an information form to say, hey, here's a recalculation of our liability in a couple different formats so you can see it clearly. Here's what we paid. It should tie out exactly because it's not some complicated system as is the yearly 1040 taxes, where we have no idea what the actual tax will be until that time period. So we paid exactly what we paid, and this will just be an information form. For more accounting information and accounting courses, visit our website at accountinginstruction.info.